for lining State Street. And if you had a business that was damaged or destroyed, you could get free plans from these architects if you built in the Spanish style. They gave you free ideas and free plans for your building. So people embrace it and people went with it, and we just have to look outside to kind of see what happened to it. To sum it all up, I'd like to go back to what Tom Stork wrote in that first edition of the newspaper that he squeezed out in De La Guerra Plaza. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, just the important parts. He says, rising above the ruin wrought by the great disturbance, Santa Barbara's people will prove they are worthy of their pioneer ancestors and begin at once the work of reconstruction. The people of Santa Barbara are meeting the burdens of this calamity which has fallen upon the city. The work of relief is already organized. The hand of the builder will soon begin the task of rebuilding. There will be work for many, and all must work. But in the end, Santa Barbara will come back bigger, better, and stronger than before, for the things that have made this city and the men who built it are still here. Amen.
All right, folks. We're looking for the Pegamentum pollis, variety of snail.
Coming up on 9 News at 9, a chemical in your home that could be killing your goldfish.
Achoo! I used to have terrible congestion. Thanks to Flonos, I can breathe easy.
No matter where you surf, your favorite wave begins right here, on your street. That's because storm drains lead straight to our creeks and ocean. When water washes into storm drains, pollutants like detergents, oil, and pet waste go along for the ride. Help keep our creeks and beaches clean. Take your car to a car wash and always pick up after your pet. Remember, the ocean begins on your street.
like to start the March 28, 2011 Single Family Design Board. Kathleen, would you call roll, please?
Bernie Nextwell will be absent today. Chair Nextwell.
Here.
Denise Gregory.
Here.
Ben Travis.
Here.
Brian Miller.
Here.
Jim Zimmerman.
Here.
Coffee. Here.
Thank you. Thank you. At this point, I'd like to open up public comment. Any member of the public may address the Single Family Design Board for up to 2 minutes on any subject within their jurisdiction that is not scheduled for public discussion before the board today. Is there anybody here for public comment? If not, I'll close public comment. And we'll move to approval of the minutes for the March 14th, 2011 Single Family Design Board. May I get a motion for approval of those minutes? First by Denise. Second by Aaron. We'll kind of go item by item. There's just a couple on this one. So item number 1, which was Sea Ranch Drive, was there any comments or corrections to the agenda or to the minutes? Item 2, 3750 Maru Lane. Any comments on the minutes? Hearing none. We'll go to Surf View Drive. Again, any comments regarding those minutes? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move to take a vote on those minutes. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. And I'll move to the consent calendar for March 21st, 2011. May I hear the calendar? May I get a motion to hear the calendar? All of Jim first, second by Brian.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Consent calendar for Monday, March 21st, 2011. Item A, 1253 Dover Lane. Receive final approval as submitted. Item B, 526 Sea Ranch Drive. Final approval with conditions. Item C, 731 Litchfield Lane. Final approval with conditions. Item D, 1229 Calle Cierto Alto. Project design approval with NPO findings and continued indefinitely to consent. Item E, 533 Conejo Road. Receive project design approval with NPO and continued indefinitely to consent. Item F, 1425 Alameda Padre Serra. Project design approval with NPO and continued indefinitely to consent. Item G, 532 La Marina Drive. Received final approval, project design approval with NPO and final approval with conditions. Item H, 1538 Manitou Road. Received project design approval with NPO and continued indefinitely to consent. And the items were reviewed by Glenn Deisler and Aaron Carroll.
Thank you. Is there any comment regarding those minutes for the consent calendar? Okay, we'll take a vote on the minutes. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So we'll move to March 28, 2011, the consent calendar. Michelle? I'm sorry? May I get a motion for?
I'll make that motion.
Paul first. Second by?
Second.
By Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Consent agenda for today, Monday, March 28th. Item A, 1401 Kenwood Road, was continued 1 week with comments. Item B, 3050 Seacliff Drive, was continued 1 week with comments. Item C, 163 La Jolla Drive, final approval as submitted. Item D, 1120 Arbolado Road, project design approval and final approval with MPO and with conditions. Item E, 821 Jimeno Road, received project design approval with NPO and continued 1 week to consent. Item F, 311 Sherman Road, received final approval of landscaping with conditions. Items were reviewed by Brian Miller and Aaron Carroll.
All right, thank you. Any discussion about the items on the consent calendar for today? Okay, I'd like to Have a vote for approval of the calendar. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So I'd like to move to announcements, if there's any announcements by staff. No announcements. Okay. And we'll go to subcommittee reports, and I don't believe we have any subcommittees, so we'll move to item number 1, which is the Single Family Design Board guidelines. I see Heather over there.
Good afternoon, Chair Deisler and members of the Single Family Design Board. My name is Heather Baker. I'm a project planner with the Design Review and Historic Preservation section. And Jaime Limon last presented these guidelines to you, was it November of 2010? And there was some follow-up work that we needed to do in response to comments on the guidelines that we received from the ABR and the HLC. They each received update versions as well as the SFDB. We didn't really receive comments from your board, but I'm just going to update you on some changes that were made to this design guideline set as a result of the work we did with the other boards and commissions, trying to keep these all consistent. And then also from some comment that we received from the city attorney's office, too. So hopefully this will be our final draft, and the goal is to have a recommendation from the SFDB today that the city council would adopt these next at an April city council hearing. So it'll just be a quick 5-minute presentation, and then I'll be available for any questions or comments on the new changes. We didn't send out hard copies this time just because we thought, that it would be simple enough to go through the changes this way. And so if there's anything in particular that was highlighted in the memo that you want me to bring up on the screen, I will. We did send out a cover memo listing the changes. The main topics are just we now have a new definition for highly visible to the public and tree removal references that have been added, licensing requirements, and then the quorum, clarification of quorum. So those will be the main topics, and then there's just some other real minor items that I'll mention along the way. So let's just go ahead and start off. On the goals page, we did add this item here that we are promoting high standards of not only architectural but also landscape design. And then this item L was suggested by the Historic Landmarks Commission. Another goal is to ensure that the review process is fair and consistent, both in policy and implementation, to allow all who are involved to benefit from the process. So hopefully that would be amenable to this board as well. And then let's move on. There's another term, there's a term in the guidelines that was previously referred to as energy efficiency, green building, and there was a suggestion again from the HLC that be changed to sustainable building and site design rather than green building. We've been using green building because we do have the green building group in town through the Contractors Association, but it seems that with the new California codes that are coming in, sustainable building and site design is more the term that's being used more frequently. So we thought we would go ahead and change that for the HLC request. And let's see, I'm just going to try this. Page 8. Okay, so I've got the track changes version on here. The version that you were sent via email was a PDF that didn't show the track changes, but this way you can see the changes that were made. And here we're looking at the administrative approval standards. Jaime went over most of these changes when he was here before. The only ones that I wanted to highlight as new, very minor, is just that we do have a reference to the color changes here because there's some standards earlier in the guidelines that need to be complied with if staff is to look at those. And then with fencing, we had a comment from another board that if there is chain link, that it should be screened with vines or shrubs. So we just went ahead and made that consistent. Let's move on. Okay, so tree removals. The next one. So there's a chapter in the municipal code, 15.24, which the boards refer to when they're considering a tree removal. And we just wanted to reference some of those concepts here. So, for example, they list specifically skyline, historic trees. And so if staff is looking at a tree removal, then we wouldn't be allowed to approve them if it was within those categories. We added those in. And then also, we're now looking at 12 inches in diameter at 4 feet, 6 inches above the ground. We wanted to be consistent with where the code is referring to that. So that's now the same. And then also, this is a concept that's in the code that we've carried through, and that there's an appropriate number and size of other trees that would remain on the building site after the requested removal, or that there would be city property trees that would keep an appropriate level of canopy in the area. And then the others were there before. So we also repeated this concept of including 15.24 in the guidelines. Let me just show you the other spot where we did this. Sorry. Okay. Well, while I'm here, let me go ahead and go over this. We referenced the state code for licensing requirements for landscape plans. There was some confusion about this before. We had, for some reason, a trigger that if something was over 5,000 square feet, it needed a licensed landscape architect. We checked the state code, and that is not there. So we removed that and then clarified per the state code when a license is required. For single-family homes, it's broader than for other types of development in general. Basically, it's saying here that if you have a concept review plan, that no license is required, and that for people who own their own property, this is pretty consistent with all types of projects, that if you're the owner of a property, you have the right to prepare your own plans, if you so wish. And for irrigation plans, there's a concept of irrigation consultants who also can prepare those. There are a couple of exceptions that can be kept here, and that is that if for some reason the board finds that the submittal it's inadequate or it doesn't meet minimum review standards, if you're not able to make sure that it complies with the guidelines, you can go ahead and suggest that they find a licensed landscape architect. Also, if it's extensive grading, revegetation, et cetera, then those special circumstance projects, you may want to ask for them as well. For final grading and drainage plans, the state code does say that, yes, you need to have, either your licensed landscape architect, registered or licensed engineer, and they have that interchangeable. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the licensed landscape architect. It can be the engineer, and they have these other categories, too, who are also allowed to do that, architects, land surveyors, et cetera. This does come into play with some of the SWMP Tier 3, the Stormwater Management Program, Tier 3. If they require a drainage plan, then you'll be looking at a licensed professional submitting those particular items as well. So that was one of the major items. And let's see where we're at in here. I want to just go to okay, so here's the considerations for the tree removals again. I was trying to get to earlier. So, again, this is from 15.24. This is the municipal code items. And so rather than you having to always refer back to the code, this will just be in your guideline set. And these should be familiar to you, the list of things that are required to be considered. There's nothing new there. It's just now referenced in your guidelines directly. Okay, so the next is the new term, highly visible to the public. And this is a term you might have seen before in reference to Planning Commission comments. It says if it's highly visible to the public, you could refer something to them for comment if you would like. We went ahead and added a definition at the suggestion of the Historic Landmarks Commission to that term. We had previously just had this new definition of publicly visible. Basically, the difference here is that highly publicly visible or highly visible to the public would front a public street or other public area. So whereas you might be able to see it, say down an alley or at an angle or so forth from a public viewing place, highly visible is going to be close to that vantage point. So hopefully that makes sense. This is a new change since the last time that we came to you. Okay, moving right along here. Okay. Just a few other little ones. So for landscape maintenance conditions of approval, this was new language that we had put in. However, the attorney just suggested that we strike some of this detail about the, you need to, if it's a conditional of approval, that they're not allowed to then later remove it and so forth. He felt that it was better just to refer to the municipal code. So if you're looking for this particular reference, it won't be there in detail anymore, but you can still refer to the code for the maintenance conditions for landscaping. The fire department commented on, on the terminology for, it was called vegetation modification zones, and the term that's used more often is defensible space. So just be aware if you're commenting on a high fire hazard area plan, the language that's suggested here is slightly different, and there's now reference to wildland fire plan. So we're just trying to get all our terminology congruent. Okay, and then just a small item on agenda organization. We have just one of the HLC commissioners felt that we should add some detail for our agendas here, that staff announcements come in, and then there's commissioner announcements, and then there's different types of subcommittee reports that you have. So there's just that minor clarification. Since we don't have that detail on our full agendas each time, people can find that in the guidelines. Okay, so then just the last item I wanted to touch on was on quorums and how we calculate quorums. We came and visited your board, I don't know, a month ago or so, or a couple months ago, regarding how things work if somebody has missed a meeting and then they're here the next time, but say they haven't had time to review plans or minutes or video, and they want to choose to go ahead and abstain, which is suggested by the guidelines if they're not prepared to comment, but they would remain in the room so that they can learn about what the current process is for that item, and then be ready to vote the next time it comes back. Well, the fact that they remain in the room, the city attorney has clarified that that still counts towards your quorum. So even though they don't vote and they abstain, that counts as towards your quorum. However, if they're stepping down, which is a different term than abstaining, if they're stepping down, say, for example, because of the Political Reform Act, they have a conflict of interest, then they would, of course, be leaving the room, and that doesn't count towards the quorum, even if they were here previous to that item. So that's just a new clarification to make that super clear in the guidelines on the quorum item. And we had gone over these abstention and project decision reconsideration items at the previous time that I came to visit your board. So really that's it, just some minor updates. And if you have any questions or comments, I'm here for you. And we would like the recommendation, please, for approval at City Council if you're ready to give that.
Thank you, Heather. Does anybody have any questions regarding the information that Heather just spoke about? I have a question about the quorum issue that you had just mentioned. If we have 4 members of the board, we have a quorum, and one decides to not step down, but not vote on the project.
That's an abstention.
Okay.
Right. So.
And
that counts.
If we had 4, so that would leave us only 3 voters. That is still an accept. It's
Yes.
just the majority of the remaining board members.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Regarding the guidelines.
Is this a guidelines question?
Yeah, apparently it's public comment on the
Okay.
guidelines.
So we'll open up public comment on this agenda item. I do have a public speaker, Mark Chitillo. Welcome. And if you have 2 minutes as far as public comment
I
goes.
just want to touch briefly on 2 issues. One is the issue of significant views. One is the issue of significant public views. And I think a clarification of what is visible to the public as opposed to highly visible to the public is very helpful. But I also think that the guidelines ought to be clarified as to what is the perspective. The language that's in there refers only to public park and beach. And one of the things that we've grappled with in city, and I've had to deal with in a number of county projects, is from what views do you examine the significance of a project's impact? And generally, we look at roads, public hiking trails, other public lands, in addition to parks and beach. But the fact that the guidelines only speak to those two criteria creates an ambiguity and an issue that can come up. So I would encourage that if it's possible to clarify that to expand and be specific as to what those are, it would help clarify the guidelines. Secondly, on the issue of landscape maintenance, I have to quarrel a little bit with the city attorney and the language that they struck, because I think we rely a lot on screening as a means of buffering and limiting projects' impacts, and to not be and in the county at the BAR there they disallow screening as a means of mitigating a project's impacts. Here, I think that it's your practice to consider screening, but if you're going to do that, you need to have the screening there for the perpetuity of or for the life of the project. And so the criteria that would require that screening does remain in place in order to have the effect, obviously there's going to be turnover to landscaping and that sort of thing. So those two issues, I think, are important to ensure your guidelines are clear and they achieve the purposes that we all want to accomplish. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your comments. Any additional public comment on this item? So I'll close public comment. Again, bring it back to the board for any questions or comments. Heather, the gentleman just spoke about sort of highly visible, the criteria of what the guidelines speak about. Can you bring that section up and kind of go over that again, just so that we have a clear understanding of...
Right, so maybe what he's referring to is that we could clarify that a public right-of-way includes streets and roads. Oh, excuse me, sorry. So perhaps he was suggesting that we clarify that this language here, public right-of-way, includes streets and roads, more for layperson terminology.
That, I guess, is what he's talking about. I mean, I understand right-of-way as streets, but...
Yeah, and sidewalks and so forth, yeah.
So...
I'd be fine to add that language if it's needed.
Okay, that's fine. And then the other item that he spoke about was about the screening issue.
Right, and again, it's not changing the rules. It's simply reducing the reference that's within the text. So the rules would still be the same. That it is required to be maintained. It's just the attorney felt it was problematic to have all of this language here repeating.
Referring to the municipal code.
Right, because there's more detail in the code than there is in this language, and so he felt it was important that people go straight to the code and get all of that detail when applying it.
That makes sense to me. Anybody else have any input on that one? No?
Okay.
So a lot of the updates that you presented were landscape oriented.
Okay.
Just a comment, but... So again, bring it to the board. Are you looking for a motion for recommendation for our board to provide you with?
Yeah, just to recommend that the council approve or adopt the updated guidelines.
Okay. Is anybody willing to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that says that we, the board, recommend to the council to adopt the modifications or the revisions to the ordinance or guidelines.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a tie.
And just to be clear, it's just guideline amendments, no ordinance amendments at this time.
Okay. Brian's second. And any further discussion on that item? We already passed public comment. How about a vote on this issue? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you. So we're going to move to item number 2, which is 1233 Mission Ridge Road. And we'll give the applicant a couple seconds to come up here. He's got some drawings and a model, and we need to get our paperwork in order too.
Where would you like the model? Where would you like the model? Right here in the middle?
Plan in the middle first.
Yeah, we'll move the model to the middle, somewhere during the presentation.
I'll just set it at the end of this video.
So this item's been in front of the board before, and we'll get some minutes from the last meeting, and we'll read those prior to the presentation. I see a lot of people in the audience. I only have one slip for public comment. So if anybody is looking to comment on this project, you need to fill out a slip and give it. There we go. We got some more. Thank you. We'll get it right in front of the camera. We have minutes coming, right? Yeah. Okay. There you go. I believe so. Okay, at this point we're going to read the minutes from the prior meeting. Denise, if you could read those.
Okay, we have a motion continued indefinitely to staff hearing officer with the following comments. Number one, the board has given the applicant the option to either return to the full board after story poles are installed or proceed to the staff hearing officer and then return to the full board. The board requests story poles to be installed prior to returning to the board. The board compliments and appreciates the applicant's reduction in square footage and the quality of architecture. Number three, the quality and style of architecture are well integrated with the lot. The alcove portal entry to the garage is well executed.
Thank you. If you could introduce your team.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Shields with Design Arc.
I'm Tom Sanborn, the applicant.
Barbara Sanborn.
Welcome. You've also been to the zoning administrator or the...
I've been a few places since we saw you guys last.
Staff hearing officer.
Planning Commission.
Staff hearing officer
Michelle, do we have those comments?
and the planning commission.
I would say, Chair Diesler and board members, the staff hearing officer approved the project I don't have the dates here, in February, or I think it was January actually, and then within the 10-day appeal period, the project was appealed by the property owner of 1225 Mission Ridge, I think it is. Where's my map?
Yes.
1225 Mission Ridge. Mr. Chitillo appealed the project on behalf of a property owner at 1225 Mission Ridge, Mrs. Denenholtz. The project was then taken to Planning Commission, and they reviewed the findings for the staff hearing officer, and they felt that the staff hearing officer had, they agreed with the staff hearing officer's approval of the performance standard permit and upheld the project and denied the appeal. So now the project is back before the Single Family Design Review Board, and the applicant is requesting project design approval. And we, as you know, we did a site visit at 3 o'clock today and viewed the story poles and visited one of the adjacent neighbors' properties. So that's the status of it.
Okay, thank you. Mark, if you could do your presentation.
Okay. I want to keep it brief because I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the project overall, and certainly after today's story pole visit, I think you have a better feeling for the entire structure. I wouldn't mind bringing the model up front and center.
At any point, if you want to put the model here, that's great.
I think that's a good idea. Just, I think I'm going to quickly recap where we were. In a nutshell, we've been to quite a few meetings with the Single Family Design Review Board and made a number of modifications to the project over the past year or so. And today, I was actually pleasantly surprised to take that visit up to the Wrights deck and really notice for the first time how much the board's suggestions of stepping this down, or maybe we came up with that idea, but I think it was a suggestion that you asked us to study. So I felt that when I was up there looking down with this stepping down towards the west and with the removal of the existing garage, how it really did open up a view corridor for the rights of the harbor. And I think that's the most beautiful view from the Riviera to the ocean. I was quite pleased to see that happening, and I think we should all be proud of that movement. Again, this palm trees kind of that we're going to be relocating actually kind of hides the view of the ocean to the east, and so I felt that our massing up towards the oak trees was justified. So I think that to some extent that designing was worthwhile and did help the neighborhood. I spoke with some of the neighbors about the portal design and assured everybody that it was under 17 feet. In some places it's much less than 17 feet and 1 story. And also I wanted to remind people that the house is a romantic design. We're trying to get that feeling of old Santa Barbara, like this project could have been the very first project in the neighborhood instead of the unfortunate last that's under so much scrutiny. And I feel that we're going to complete the detailing in true Santa Barbaran, Mary Craig, George Washington Smith detailing, and we're looking forward to that opportunity. And with that, I'd like to move forward to look at the landscape plan, which we haven't discussed before. And there's a new drawing to this set, which we just completed. Apologize for not getting it in earlier, but we were busy and we just completed it. And again, this is a preliminary landscape plan, as both Denise and Aaron will be able to tell. But it has some big ideas, and I think again we're shooting for this 20s old school, old-fashioned project that feels like it's been in the neighborhood forever, and some of the plantings I hope reflect that. I think we could start first by looking at the major landscape feature, which is the 2 existing oaks that we've endeavored to preserve. These are these guys as well. We've also mentioned moving the palm tree that's kind of falling over, about to fall over on the property line here where it's kind of wrecked the sandstone retaining wall. And so we like that old school, Phoenix canariensis, trimmed up Hollywood kind of vibe. So I think we like to keep it, but move it to the east. As another important point is that we're really not planting any skyline trees at all in respect to our neighbor's privacy to the north of us. The only trees we're proposing is a tree in the motor court, which would be hopefully a beautiful hand-selected multi-trunk olive, but it's the neutered olive, the Swan Hill olive. So all of these new trees would be olives, these 2 and this one, which Denise actually suggested we do something to break up this existing hedge on the north side of the property. So we like the idea of another olive in this north courtyard off of the cottage unit. Other trees that we're adding might include a citrus tree here and there, and also the citrus kind of goes with the raised vegetable garden, which we're proposing down here on the sunny side of the project. Other trees, we have the fire issue, and we're trying to be creative, even though we can't plant, major trees next to the home. I've always liked the Draconia dragon trees, and we might find a specimen for that right at the front entry. And this you can see in the north elevation as well. A lot of the landscape thinking here goes with the elevations, and I think that's always important that the plant massing is put in the right places, against the beautiful plaster walls. I also wanted to point out that our parking area, once you go through the portal, which is on axis with the oak tree beyond, our surfaces change. Out here at the entry off of Greenridge Lane, we're going with a paved surface because of that's fire truck access and also the fire truck turnaround. I've had experience with this on the Riviera before, where we tried to do permeable paving everywhere, but the fire department really, in the end, wouldn't approve it. And so this is going to be textured and integral colored concrete, sand finish, pitted, salted finish, so it's kind of rustic feeling. Then as you enter the porthole, the surface changes to tumbled Cherokee Creek pavers. They're about this big, set at a random pattern at first, and then following the shape of this parking area. and they are permeable. So they would be set over 6 inches of road base and grouted with DG. So permeable surface here. Also, the edges of this parking area we're kind of messing with because we want to break up that feeling of rigidity, and so the edges are rough cut, broken sandstone pavers and a walk. That's Cherokee Creek flagstone, and Cherokee Creek flagstone is pretty much used throughout the project on all of our exterior spaces, and that's hand broken random joint Cherokee Creek flagstone. Some of the smaller plantings, as you get closer to the house, the entry, which kind of matches the illustration we did of the portal. We have senecio, that blue ice plant, on both sides of the entry, with an olive tree, as I mentioned before, and also some. Where's my thing? I'm blanking on my favorite plant. What is that?
Something beautiful.
The agave, yeah. So the agave americana, which are the big guys, the big gnarly ones that have that real 30s feeling to them, and I love that. So we're doing that, flanking the entry, as well as a little hedge, a clipped boxwood hedge that wraps around the curved element. Interspersed in that, we have some rosemary falling over the sandstone retaining wall, as well as some blue agaves puncturing the blue ice plant. Elsewhere, we use a combination of the senecio and, backed by jasmine, a select magnolia trees in the shade against the project here and there, some pencil cactus, kind of more of the succulent Mediterranean feeling plantings. We've introduced the idea of potted plants, of course, around the decks, which would also be with succulents. This lower area where we have taken up room for our future bioswale is pretty much another kind of open area on the property, and we thought it might be kind of more native down there to go with ceanothus in big patches, and then in between with the native grasses. So that about sums up the landscape plan. The property is surrounded on the property line by all 4 existing hedges, which are mostly Pittosporum and Eugenia.
Eugenia.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I hope you like it.
Is there any additional changes to the plan and elevations since the board has seen it?
No, we haven't. We haven't touched the elevations or sections or.
Okay. Anything else for your presentation?
Tom, anything to add? No?
I'd like to reserve time, if we have it, to respond if there are any new issues come up.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, public comment. Open public comment. I have, looks like 9 or 10 public comment slips. And we got them, and they're not in any specific order, so when I call your name, if you could come up. We'd like to reserve that seat right there.
Yes.
Thank you. Each public comment is limited to 2 minutes, and we have a clock, and we have to maintain that 2-minute time period. So please keep your comments succinct. If somebody before you had already made a comment that you agree with, you don't have to repeat the entire comment. Just say, I agree with the previous speaker. And therefore, we're not here till 7 or 8 o'clock tonight. Nobody wants to be here for that. But all your comments are important, so please just make sure you listen to all the comments, and if there's a new item that you want to comment on, please feel free. So the first public speaker will be Judy Denenholz. And we're going to call out the next person as well, so if you could be prepared. After this applicant, Keith Rivera will be the second speaker. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I wasn't prepared to be first. I actually thought I would be preceded by my attorney, who has done a lot of work on this, and I think will give you some good insight based on his experience with the land use. I'm here really just as a neighbor, and have been concerned from the outset about the size of the project in the neighborhood, on the lot, fitting in with and being compatible with the neighborhood. The massing and the scale of it seem not to be compatible from our, my husband and I, David, are the owners of 1225 Mission Ridge. There is a photo that you'll be seeing soon that shows the massing based on the story poles. And we'd been hoping for the story poles and really hoping for story poles, as Tom and Barbara know, of the whole project, so that we could see the entry portal, the garages, the second dwelling, the main dwelling, the whole project. Here are some of the visual simulations that are taken.
If we're going to have the presentation, it's either going to be your comment or hers, and it needs to be on the camera.
I'll give you something for that.
Okay. You want to finish up, Judy?
Okay. The entry in particular is troublesome because it's so wide and so deep. It's 10 feet deep, and it's, I don't know how many feet wide because it connects to the garages. And all of that's not depicted really in the story poles, but I think when you take a look at the massing model, or not the massing model, that's what they have, the massing visual simulation, you'll see what I'm talking about. It looks, it is, to me, personifies bulky. It personifies heavy. It's large, and I don't think there are any, it's more like I know the board thought architecturally it's interesting, et cetera, but it doesn't really fit into the neighborhood. We don't have, it's more like a monument than it is a entryway. It's so deep. I just don't see that the neighborhood should be burdened with, someone said to me, it looks like it came from Disneyland. It shouldn't have that big non-functional structure right in the neighborhood on a relatively small lot with the two houses. We've gone through some of these issues before. We do appreciate that the Sanborns have been very gracious in allowing us to see their massing model. Oh, they're up. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't understand. Okay. All right. Okay.
Thank you. So Keith Rivera, the next speaker will be Mark Chilo? It's hard to read the writing.
Hi, thank you. Keith Rivera, on behalf of the Gainies, who live directly on the lot to the south.
Mark, do we have a map of a neighborhood map that shows?
We have an aerial photo. Maybe that.
Okay. Maybe I think that would be important for some of the speakers to identify their locations.
Yeah, that'd be great.
We won't get you on the time.
So you probably remember that all along the Gainies have had concerns about potential privacy impacts of the second floor viewing into their private outdoor spaces. So last time at the last meeting, we appreciated a lot of the design moves that the applicant had made to address those concerns, and we wanted to kind of withhold judgment until the story poles were up and we could see in the flesh how things laid out. So now that those are in place, Gainies have had a chance to look at that, and they feel there's some definite impacts with direct views from the second floor master bedroom into their private backyard areas. So here's just a photo of the story poles, and we just trace the outline of the lines. And my understanding that there was this mark on this one pole was representing the eye level height of the second floor, so you can see you have a direct line of sight from that second floor window to their pool area. And then likewise, here's just kind of a little closer view that shows that, and then you can see that there's their terrace area as well, a little further up in the yard. So you're going to have these direct views from that second floor window to their spaces. So the Gainies would request that the board direct the applicant to do some further design moves to address these impacts, and ask that you not take any action until they've satisfactorily addressed the privacy impacts to your satisfaction. So that's it. Thank you.
So Mark, and then the next speaker will be Beth Ford.
Mr. Chair, before I get started, I have two packets of material, and I've got copies for the board members themselves. These are visual simulations that you may keep. The multi-paged one is from 1225, the Denenholz's residence, and the single page is from 1231, which is Mr. Wright's, the porch that you went up to. Can I start?
Sure.
Thank you.
You already have. You're 30 seconds in.
Noted that we did submit a letter. Hopefully you've had a chance to review that. Our first request is that you increase the story pole requirement. There are 6 criteria for story poles. This project meets 5 of them. They story poled the upper story, and we then commenced Mr. Dowd, Ken Dowd, Videoscapes, who's an accepted city contractor to prepare visual simulations to show the massing of the project. And so you have a representation of it from the 2 relevant views. It's our sense that this project is just too big and too much for the site, and we believe that these images are helpful in characterizing that as viewed from the various locations. There's a larger area of coverage from this building than virtually any other structures or neighbor houses in the vicinity. It's taller than necessary, being sited on a raised area where there's fill as opposed to grading it down. To lower the house height, the height is excessive. At 29.5 feet exceeds the hillside design guidelines, and it should, in our view, be single story as recommended by architect Ed Easton's comments that were provided to you in writing. The massing is excessive, in particular, not only the main building, but also around the garage entry sequence and the huge motor court. Our request is that you lower the height of the structure, you reduce its bulk, you shift it eastward and reduce its mass. I want to just thank you for the site visit and considering the views of Mr. Wright, and in particular acknowledge Member Zink's efforts to contact and communicate with the neighbors. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation. So we're going to have Beth Ford, and on deck will be Laurel Phillips.
I guess if I could go last. Would that be all right?
And your name? Hi.
Hi, my name is Beth Ford, and I just wanted to alert you to a letter that was written to the Planning Commission from the Allied Neighborhoods Association, and hand that out to you. Some of the issues here are also applicable to your board, particularly, again, the very large size of this project. Allied Neighborhood Association is concerned with the 29-foot 6-inch height, which is inconsistent with your guidelines. The over 5,000 square feet in structures, 3,500 square feet in covered porches, patios, pool, spa, and an additional 4,200 in pavements for driveways. Again, exceeding your 85% guideline, 85% of the FAR in the guidelines and height guidelines. They were also concerned about this project involving so much paving and impermeable surfaces, and as we learned today, part of those surfaces that were before designated as impermeable are now permeable, the driveway along the west side, and they asked that you analyze the drainage carefully. And lastly, again, they're very concerned about the story poles and concerned that they were not put up prior to the Planning Commission hearing. They say this violates the spirit of the good neighbor policy and makes it difficult for the public to determine the size and scope of the project and whether they have any concrete concerns. So again, they would ask you to follow your guidelines and reduce the size of this structure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Katie O'Reilly Rogers will be next, followed by Beverly Johnson Triad. Welcome.
Hello there. I have 3 main comments. Actually, I have 4 comments. One, I do agree with the architect that this is a handsome structure, and it does look like it could have been there in the 20s or 30s, which is my era. I know I don't look 70, but believe me. I really appreciate Mark's preliminary landscape plan. It's nice when we have cross-training between the disciplines. And I appreciate his statement that in order to respect the privacy of the uphill neighbors, they didn't want any skyline trees. However, I hope they would also be respecting their downhill neighbors. And when the final landscape plan comes in, I look forward to seeing how they are mitigating the privacy issues to the downhill neighbors. That's one. Number two, I love olive trees. Olive trees are not on the low ignition plant list and won't be accepted up there, as we're finding out at El Encanto. So that's not going to work, but a small tree would be pretty. And my third comment is, I don't know why you'd put a future bioswale in. You either put it in or you don't. Ceanothus will not take the water that accumulates in a bioswale. If you're going to put a bioswale in, put filtration plants. Don't put plants that will die in it. That is my comment.
Thank you very much. Beverly Johnson Triad and Alan Trial? And Alan Trial will be after that.
I'm channeling from Medieval Chicken. My handwriting isn't the best. Yeah, I'm Beverly Johnson Trial, as I was about an hour ago. And a lot of the wind has been taken out of my sails here for previous people, which you'll be happy to know. Okay. We neighbors have been requesting story poles since the first hearing last summer. Now that we have story poles, we know that the proposed houses will be visible from public spaces such as Mission Ridge, High Ridge, and Arbolado. I have pictures of those showing story poles from those locations.
Do you have those pictures?
I'm technically ignorant, and they're in my camera, which I don't know how to make prints out of them. I have to wait till my husband comes home. I'm sorry, but there's been extensive trimming on High Ridge that makes it extremely obvious to see. The second one, yes. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm not talking now about my own private views. I'm talking about public views. So public views on Mission Ridge, on Arbolado, and on High Ridge. So being able to see the house from these public locations is contrary to what the applicants have told the board, and the board needs to reconsider what has been said in the past. This entire design review process, I have felt that many of the good ideas from the plan for Santa Barbara have been ignored. However, we do very much appreciate the hard work of the board and your willingness to listen to our comments. And now I will read a short note from my husband, Alan Trial.
And this is his public comment, so we can restart. Okay?
Yes. Okay. I oppose the current application for development at 1233 Mission Ridge Road for the reasons that I've mentioned at previous SFDB meetings, including, number one, the scale of the proposed development is inconsistent with the character of the neighborhood. Let me again remind the board that the development as a whole is 134% of the maximum guideline FAR. Number two, additional traffic from a second house decreases public safety, particularly during an emergency such as an evacuation, of which we've had two so far. And three, and last, the approval of a development so far above the guidelines sets a precedent that will ultimately lead to much higher densities throughout the Riviera, to the detriment of Riviera residents and the city of Santa Barbara as a whole. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. So the last speaker, unless somebody fills out a slip, is Laurel Phillips. Welcome.
Thank you. I feel like the lone salmon swimming the wrong way up the stream, since I have been in favor of this project since its inception. I am the next door neighbor to the Trials on High Ridge Lane.
This house right here?
Yes, and I want to point out how much higher, significantly higher, High Ridge Lane is, hence the name, from Green Ridge. I see absolutely nothing of the project, and I am a little bit lower than the Trials house, so I just want to mention that. I also want to mention that the setback that the Sanborns have agreed to is over the minimum. I believe it's 70 feet, which is significantly ahead of the 60-foot requirement. From what I understand from the Sanborns, their first story is already lowered from the previous structure, so there is no grading, there is no elevation. They are not humping the project up to get a better view. It is a one-story project. I resent anybody saying that this is a two-story project. The only two-story element is a master bedroom. They have already gone away from any major veranda, which we all would love to have for the price that they paid for this property. They are having the simple iron walkout that is barely usable. That is what they've agreed to mitigate any privacy issues of the Gainey downhill neighbor. I do not know who the Allied Neighborhood Association is. I would like to challenge that they have any standing to even pipe up at this particular meeting if they are not in the Riviera. Excuse me, but why do they have standing to even make a comment? Also, to bring a massing model in, I don't know if it was shown to the Sanborns before, but how do we know that it's accurate? It's in Darth Vader gray. It looks, incredibly unattractive. I would just challenge the fact that that is accurate. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much.
I submitted an email before, but if you want to...
Okay. Is there any other comments from staff for this project?
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to acknowledge a few letters received that have already been forwarded to you, either via email or in paper format. I received a letter from Tom and Barbara Sanborn, the owners, in support, obviously. Laura Gilbert Phillips, a neighbor who just spoke, in support. Sarah Stewart, a neighbor at 1225 Mission Ridge, in support. Mary Lou Fay at High Ridge Lane, in support. Sarah Little and Fred Davis at Los Alturas Road, in support. Dorothy Padilla at Green Ridge Lane, in support. Glendon Dyruff at Green Ridge Lane, in support. Charles and Joyce Wright via Mark Chatillo, the attorney for the appellant, opposed. Judy and David Denholtz via Mark Chatillo, the attorney for the appellant, opposed. Edward Easton of Kellogg Branch, opposed. James Knight, of the president of the Riviera Association, just addressed some issues. Alan Trial, opposed on High Ridge Lane, and Paula Westbury, opposed.
Thank you.
Chair Deisler,
Yes.
is it Deisler? Or
Deisler.
Deisler, okay. And board members, I do think it's important to just, the letter from the Riviera Association, I don't know if you've read it yet, but it did wanted to clarify whether or not they felt that the Allied Neighborhood Association should be representing them. So I'll let you read you've read the letter, and I'll forward it to anyone who wants a copy of it, but I don't need to go into detail, but it didn't feel that, the letter stated that the Allied Neighborhood Association does not actually represent the Riviera Association's opinions, per se. So.
Thank you. Okay. At this point, not hearing any more public comment, we will close public comment and bring it back to their board for their questions, please. I have a couple questions. Mark, have you looked into the stormwater management program as far as how this site's going to work?
We have calculations regarding that, and as well as I believe our civil engineers looked into it. We're not actually required to prove that yet since we don't have preliminary approval. But he felt comfortable he felt comfortable that the site was large enough that we wouldn't have a problem with the stormwater management.
So when it says future bioswale, is that?
That's what I mean. We're planning for that. We have some calculations, but there's no need to design it unless we have a project approval.
Okay. Other questions for the applicant? There's been a lot of discussion about the height limit or the height guideline. If you could kind of walk us through that process here. I'm not seeing any dimensions on the elevations at this point.
You should go to the east. Let's see, where's the east elevation? There's a 30-foot height limit in this area in the zoning ordinance, and this line indicates that. Mm-hmm. And so at the very, very highest point, which is the very tippy top of the tile on the master bedroom, we're 6 inches below the actual height limit. The majority of the house is well below the height limit. In fact, probably 2/3 of it is under 17 feet high.
All right, thank you. Brian, questions?
A lot of clarity about the FARs. What exactly is your FAR on this property? Because that wasn't clear.
Tom, would you like to address that?
Well,
Actually, I think I'd rather staff do it, since this is your standards.
Okay. Kelly Bronison, I didn't introduce myself earlier, assistant planner. So for lots that are 15,000 square feet or greater, the FAR is looked at as a guideline. It's not an ordinance. And so we didn't, in the ordinance does not spell out exactly how, for applicants, how to calculate an FAR for additional dwelling units. When this project first came in, staff made the determination that you would basically take 15,000 square feet, which is the minimum lot size in the E1 zone, and that 15,000 square feet would be for one dwelling unit, and then the rest of the lot would be for the other dwelling unit. So they've calculated out the FAR. I have them. I think they're actually on the agenda or in the description.
Right. And so
FAR
we're just under 100% on the larger portion, and we're in the neighborhood of 35% or so on the other.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
I have a question. In anything that was submitted to the city, do we have an existing topographical map that shows what the finished floor of the current house is?
Yes.
Is that part of stuff that was submitted? If I can get a look at that, I'd appreciate it.
It's proposed.
A survey of the existing property. And then the second question is, that's a survey. Does it show what the elevation of the existing house is?
Yes.
683.
304 and 687.
683. This matches here. So this is elevated up.
So it's okay. And then do we know what the plate-to-plate heights are? In particular, this zone here, what's happening on the first floor and what's happening on the second floor there?
Okay. On the first floor, and it's been a while, I think we have 10-foot plates. 10-foot plates on the first floor. And the second floor, I believe, a master bedroom, the plates are at 8.6 because it actually kicks down to 3 and 12 pitch or a 2 and 12 pitch over the little loggia that faces east.
One last question. The secondary residential unit off to the side, how tall is that building?
That's about 16 feet at the very, very top.
And that's dimensioned somewhere?
Probably isn't.
Okay.
But we would be happy to.
Additional questions? Jim, you have a question? No? No? Additional questions? Has traffic and the fire department reviewed?
We've had extensive review by numerous surveyors. The fire department has written a couple letters, which the city, both staff hearing officer and the planning commission have seen. We have tons of backup support on every one of our factual presentations. So whatever you need, we have. Police department haven't said anything yet. That's about it.
Obviously, the only reason why I asked the question is so that the driveways and everything, you're
It's
not going to
all
have to
good.
redesign
No,
that at
it's
a
all
later
good.
date.
They're satisfied with it. Improves the safety.
We have the letters if you'd like to review them again.
Not hearing any more questions, move into comments.
I have a comment.
Jim?
I think it's a beautiful project. From the, do you have that photograph that you took from that simulates standing on the second floor?
Yes.
So that's standing at the second floor at a eye level.
Blue line is eye level.
6 feet.
5.5.
And standing on Wright's balcony, we're not required to keep view corridors open.
Correct.
I think that the most prominent view from his balcony is left open, which is a view of the harbor. But what I'd like to see is plate heights. You know, just take the elevations and show the different plate heights, because there might be a possibility of taking that highest portion and possibly maybe lowering the slope or dropping it a foot or so, which would make a huge difference.
Okay. Other comments?
Paul? Well, I had the opportunity to visit some of the neighbors' houses, and I actually went and I took photographs of the houses. I don't think I need to show you the photographs because what we've seen today from the other people reflects what I saw from their point of view. But everyone says the architecture is beautiful, and there's nothing wrong with that, and that's the way it is. We're under comments. My comment is we're looking at a large house, but the city planning commission or staff hearing officer has blessed a secondary dwelling unit. So this is not like a normal one house. They've gotten permission because the lot is so large to have a secondary unit. So then that gives them the more wiggle room to have a larger structure. What does concern me, and it's what I saw when I was at the job site the story polls this weekend, as well as when we were there as a group, was the fact that the finished floor of the house has been elevated so significantly. And we can go through the grades, and I can show you these numbers, and we can compare them with the numbers that they're proposing here. But one of the things that I think is lacking in what we are going to be making a decision upon is enough information. And the enough information is there isn't going to be some sections cutting through here showing where the existing grade or the existing finished floor and what you're proposing. Your structure is 30 feet from existing grade, which is your limit, but we're also elevating the site by 5 feet or 4 feet or some number like that. So my perspective is I can see the house going down some number, and if anything, if you're 8.5 feet on the second floor, my goodness gracious, I mean, I can see you dropping the whole house by 4, but then adding another 2 in the second floor, because why is the master being pinched so much? But until we have a section, we don't understand what's happening with the roof volumes. And from a designing point of view, we don't do $1 million houses with 8-foot ceilings. So I need more information to make an understanding, but standing where the table was, which is where the flagstone is, and looking at the number here going, there's no reason why we have to elevate the house 5 feet above that flagstone in order to establish we're at this floor and this floor, and true you are 30 feet. I just think when we look at the overall size, bulk, and scale of the structure, that's what we focus on, and I do believe that there can be some reduction that happens, not in the square footage, but in the appearance of the structure. It's fabulous. The design is good. Dimensions are missing. Elevations are how high the building is, especially in the secondary residence. The 3D modeling, I'm not going to question the accuracy, but it does show that the secondary unit seems a little bit on the large side, but it could be from the perspective, which is why I wanted to see the dimensions.
Paul, these gentlemen didn't do that.
I know they didn't do it, and I'm not questioning the accuracy of the thing, because the guy was paid to do it, and I assume he was responsible. But what the two things I saw in this picture, and then I looked at the elevation, it seemed like there's a little too much meat happening up here on the top of that arch. And if this is 17 feet, that's fine. But that one thing from this perspective. But this elevation of here versus here, I know it has to do with the perspective, but I went to your drawings and I'm looking at this is more of a modern style. Is this plate 12 feet over here? And if it's really going to be the secondary building, does it need a 12-foot plate? So I need some more information here, as well as the grades and everything having to do with the living area for that second story.
Thank you. Aaron?
Generally speaking, I felt pretty comfortable today looking at the story pills. I think you bring up a good point about the finished floors and what's happening there. So I definitely would concur with that. One thing I was thinking is maybe the highest point of the building could just shift a little bit to the east. I mean, not enough to affect those oak trees, but just a little bit, I think would open up that view corridor a little bit. As far as the paving and landscape plan, I was thinking maybe this driveway that leads to the garage could be permeable. Maybe that's something to look into, maybe a ribbon or something there. this palm seems a little close to the existing oaks. Maybe it just shifts a little down and kind of flanks the pool. I think that might be a little stronger and get it away from those oaks. I think generally speaking, the landscape plan is a good start, and it just needs to keep going on that.
All right, thank you. Denise?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Well, I was rather struck by the story poles today, and I think it's beautiful architecture. I think one of the things that has started to nag at me a little bit is the thickness of that portal coming in, and the kind of rotunda that's next to it. That it seems very compound-like and very almost prison-like a prison entrance coming in there. And I just think that if that was lightened up and narrowed and not made so thick, I think it would be a much nicer entryway and wouldn't be impact this massing. I mean, I felt from looking down from above from the neighbor's house, it really was an ominous presence with just the story poles, and that wasn't even with the rest of the bulk of the building coming back at him. And it started to bother me that the mass is just too great for that lot. That being said, too, I thought that it could be possible to shift the whole thing back and over, like Aaron said, a bit, in order to have less of an impact on the downhill neighbor and the uphill neighbor. And I'm just trying to think of also with a 10-foot plate on the first floor, that if that could come down a bit, I think the whole massing issue would be just a little bit more palatable for me. That's all I have to say.
All right, thank you. Brian, any additional comments?
I have a few.
Okay.
Regarding the grading, I understand what Paul is saying, but I'm thinking part of the reason you're doing what you're doing is the fact that it's a sloped property, right? And the fact that you've got to have a level surface, and unfortunately, your grade up here is 687.5. Your finished floor of your living room is 687. So you're trying to level the property. I think that's part of the problem. So even if you were to lower this, you're going to have to start cutting into the back of the property. So then you got another issue going, the retaining walls, and I don't know if that's a good thing to look into or not. I felt when I was there, and it was really good to be at the neighborhood, I felt that the massing and the bulk and the scale of the building is appropriate. What struck me is that this house is a 3-story house, that there's a house over here that's a 3-story house. I thought that this whole row of trees here completely blocked the view of these 3 homes. So I just feel like, if we're going to start, and the thing that I think is your disadvantage of your property is it's a park. It looks like a park. It's an open space, and what these neighbors have been enjoying is a park. It's not a park. It's a private property. And because of that, it's going to be developed, and now it's being developed. I think the Sanborns have selected a very good architect who's very sensitive to the ideals and standards of architecture in Santa Barbara. They could have hired someone from L.A. It could have been an absolute nightmare because, I'm sorry, I don't want to pick out L.A., but it could have been someone from out of this area, and you could have had something that was, it could have been a very different scenario. So I feel that they've done a very good job. And yes, it could be maybe tweaked a little bit, but I think it's a very beautiful home. I think it's compatible with the neighborhood. They're not introducing anything new or different. There are houses there that are 2 stories. There's houses there that are 3 stories. And the fact that the only person I really see impacted is this neighbor, and they're supporting it. I tried at the best I could, standing on high points to see if I could see the pool, and I couldn't from the neighbor down below. So I feel that it's a good property. I think it's a good project, and I think if we do look at have them lowering the finished floor of the house, then they're going to run into grading issues in the back of the property. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Any additional comments from board members? I haven't really shared my view yet. Question, how much grading actually is occurring on this proposal?
Not a lot.
60 cut, 60 fill.
Yeah, it's all balanced. There's not a lot of grading.
Okay.
Which is good.
Sure, Paul.
So then you're going to be elevating the finished floor. The existing house is here, the existing finished floor. Now the existing finished floor is going to be up here. It's going to be crawl space?
There's a little bit of crawl space.
Because it's not
at the
slab on grade
very
construction?
lower point. Yeah, it'll be raised wood floor.
Raised wood
On the
floor.
lowest portion, of course.
Okay. In general, I'm falling in line with Brian's comments. I think the project is getting very approvable. The story poles were a great tool. We can debate as to whether or not they were enough on one-story portions, but typically one-story portions are not story-poled. That was kind of a judgment by the city, so the applicant did exactly what they were asked to do. Again, Brian made a comment. There are some large houses in the neighborhood, 2.5, 3-story views from the underside of some of these houses. Brian made an excellent comment as well about this being an open park-like scene that everybody likes to see through. So those are all good comments. Architecture is very well detailed. There's no question about that. I will agree with Aaron and regarding the entry and those photo simulated massing models over there, and I don't know how accurate they are, but it's a reasonable tool to look at regarding the mass that's going to appear at the corner of that site, and the majority of that actually is not even calculated in FAR, the portal that you drive through. So that does add some mass to that corner. It's one story, and it's handsome. Nobody's going to debate that. Let me see one other comment that I had. I will agree with Paul and Jim regarding the information on the plans. I think there's more information that we need to see to evaluate as far as sections, plate heights, vertical dimensions, integrating with the survey that shows grades of how, where the finished floor is relative to existing grade. And all of those drawings haven't quite come together yet. All that being said is, I thought the story poles were pretty well. I mean, I wish when I got on site, it didn't appear as a large 2-story walking on the front of the property. Now, it does go into the view planes of some of the neighbors, but so do all of the other houses in the neighbors. So it's nothing unusual. The one item that I really want the applicant to study, because it's not a view issue, it's a privacy issue, and it's a neighborhood compatibility issue, is the neighbor in front of you, and Keith presented that photograph of the story poles looking back, and then he filled in basically that plane, and that red mark where the eye level was clearly visible from the back side of the pool. I mean, if you move in here, the angle is probably sharp enough. So I'm not sure how you want to address that, but I think there's some privacy issue between these two lots that there's a solution for somewhere, and whether or not you want to provide some screening at that location that you're going to have to just view around because it's going to ultimately break your plane a little bit view-wise. That might be the solution. The other solution is move back, move down, which I don't think is, at this point, the best solution. So those are my comments. Yes, sir, Jim.
A section, like 2 sections through the building, showing finished grade and existing grade would really be a big help.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'll add on. The comment about private view and public view is what we have to struggle with a lot, as well as the size, both and scale of the actual structure when we're all said and done. And I'm actually going to be really strong in saying we don't protect private views. And as much as the downhill neighbor has a problem with the way that house shows, I actually was there at the pool. I actually saw how it looks from his perspective, and I understand that, but this is an E1 zoning. The setback by the ordinance says the house has to be this far from the property line, and that's it, and he's 30 feet from what was the existing grade or finished grade, whichever is greater. So that's what dictated what that little orange dot or blue dot was. So I don't think it's the point of this board to say that he needs to do something to this window to protect a private view when we all live in a community. I just have to hold my ground on that point.
Again, it's a distinction between what's a view and a privacy issue between neighbors. And it's a subtle point, but I think it's something that the applicant can meet with the neighbor down below. There's an architect and a landscape architect that represent that neighbor down below. I know you guys can come up with a solution. So I'll just leave it at that. I'm going to reserve a couple minutes, and if you want to respond to any of the comments or how you would like to proceed. I don't think the board is quite comfortable enough to make a motion at this point. For approval, correct.
I think this has all been very good input. I appreciate it. I think that we're very close. There are a couple things that have come up that I think we can go back and look at. I like the notion of trying to slide it to the east a few feet, a couple feet. I don't think we have great latitude because this is not a parallel line. It's angled, and so as this moves over, traffic, the motor court slides down, and now your separation becomes less. You're right. We have a 10-foot rear yard setback here. We're close to 70, so I think that if it became 65, I'm not sure it makes that makes the difference. But that would be a consequence. I'm saying that anything you slide, no surprise to you, changes other things. One of the things that drives the elevations is, has never been brought up by us, is that we have a very strong ridge line of our lower neighbor. And this is the view from a platform we built to stand at the living room level. And standing at the living room, if you're sitting, obviously you basically lose the city. 1 or 2 feet here just makes a huge difference, and that's really what generated the height. So the living room is the highest floor element, but it's a single-story element, so that doesn't add to the bulk of the structure. Then we step down where normally the living room would obviously you'd be stepping down from the kitchen down to the living room. Here we actually step up to be able to look over that ridge line. The kitchen gets beyond that ridge line, and we can step down then. But I think that you don't want to start stepping down several feet. It just becomes awkward. So there really is a lot of thought that has gone into that. But we can go back. We can look. I'd like to explore the idea of sliding a couple feet to the east. That was one of the things the story poles told me, that we have more room over there than I thought. I mean, I think you could get a couple feet closer to the oaks without feeling like it's crowding the oaks. This has been going on interminably. I can tell you, we're so tired of this. But I'd like to give it one more shot. I'd like everybody. We're not going to make everybody happy, but I'd like to give an honest try to refine this with the input we've had. Again, I don't think it will meet all of your objectives, but if you're up for it, I'm up for it.
And I don't think, after studying the sections and referring to what Tom's talking about with our project being over to see over that long ridge of the house to the south, we don't have a lot of leeway to drop the house a ton. There might be inches there. It's a careful study, but it's not going to be radical. We've looked at that a couple of times, and I just want you to know that, not expecting that we're going to be able to just change the ridge line by 4 or 5 feet. It's just not going to happen. So I would appreciate clear direction from the board today. I think we've been through a lot. We've made a lot of changes. We've listened. We've been through, tons of city scrutiny, all of which we've come out it looks fairly positive for the project. And so from you guys, I want to move forward with clear direction. I think we can make architectural design changes. I do think it's a good project, and we've worked hard to get it that way, and you guys have helped. But I want to have very clear direction if we're coming back in 2 weeks.
Okay. Is that your preference to come back in 2 weeks?
Well,
depending on the comments?
I think so. I think we'd like to go forward with, as many of you feeling positive about the project as possible. And if it takes us a little more wiggling and futzing around with the design, we can do that.
Is the agenda available in 2 weeks for our project?
Several new projects coming in.
Can we talk about that and maybe get Tom and I talk about when we can come back? I mean,
yeah, we can.
Not maybe it's not 2 weeks. That's a possibility. All right, sure.
We do appreciate your willingness to take our comments and make whatever changes come out of those comments. The reason why we're going through this process is, and it's important to a lot of people because there's 25 people out here, and this project is a large project on the site. So we just have to take it to another level of scrutiny, and we're just not 100% sure about some of the drawing information, and that's why we're asking for more information sometimes. You have an excellent team. I know that they can work some magic, so I'm looking forward to the solution. Bringing it back to the board for a motion is probably just a 4-week continuance.
Really?
My only problem is I'm not going to be here. She's whole week.
Yes, Paul?
Okay, all right.
To follow up
Maybe
on what
get it in.
Mark was saying, he wanted some clear direction, so maybe
Yeah.
we should do a little arm wrestling here about what we want in clear direction.
Please.
Because
Please do.
my arm wrestling, or my point is, where we had our song and dance pony show on that table, on that flagstone, I thought was fine for the finished floor. A foot or 2 foot higher than that is fine. But to take what that flagstone area was, where the table was, where the model and the drawings, elevate that 5 feet and say, okay, here is where the finished floor is, I think is... Wait, I don't know what the numbers are. I mean, we can look at the numbers, we can compare here. If we're elevating this thing 4 feet, it seems excessive to me. And I believe the house can come down. He's at the 30 feet, which is fine, so I'm saying if you take it down a lot, you can put another foot in the master bedroom, because why make that room too small? So I'm not really asking him to lower the ridge. I'm just saying the house itself seems... We're elevating the site too much to accommodate what he wants to do. It's an aggressive project because there's a lot of building going on. And I thought about this weekend. If he was building only one house, we would ask him to lower it, move it, do something else. Because the lot was so big. He's building basically 2 houses with a square footage of 2, so things got moved around a little bit. It's elevated, in my estimation, too high, and there's room for it to come down. And that's just, if I'm the only person, that's fine, but I think if he wants clear direction, I think we need to discuss this more as a team.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Denise.
I agree with Paul about that. That was, I think, my first impression when I was there looking at the story poles, was that it was way up there in the air, that the second story piece. And any way that can come down, if I mentioned plate height in the first floor, but if I love high ceilings, so I mean I could see your reluctance to do that. If Paul has a different way to do that, then that's great by me too. I think you have a really approvable project. Don't get me wrong, it's beautiful, but just the height of that master bedroom is just, in my opinion, too much.
Okay, so since we're wrestling, we probably just need to hear just a quick comment from other people if they're wrestling with the height issues as well. Brian, we'll go down.
I keep looking at this site plan, preliminary grading plan. The residential unit 2 is 687.5. The finished floor of the living room is 687. If if they were to lower the house, then it would probably have to be a step down right here at the courtyard. You know, so there would be a step down a little bit. I mean, that's possible. And maybe, and the other thing I would say is just narrow the portal.
Do you find that the height is needing to come down of the ridges?
I don't think it needs to be, but if it's an issue with the board, that would probably be where I would have it done, is right in this area. Keep these at that height, and then have it step down into the courtyard another step.
Okay. Jim, how do you feel about the height?
Well, I think the height is fine.
Okay.
I think the lot is, the property is expansive enough where it can accept that. I would like to see a couple sections through the house to see if possibly we can maybe lower the slope a slight bit on the roof, maybe to pick up a couple feet.
Aaron, how are you feeling about the height of the ridges?
Generally speaking, I'm comfortable. If it comes down 6 inches, great.
Yeah.
And moving, sliding to the east a little bit would be a benefit.
I'm falling in that line too, where I'm pretty comfortable with what's there. I think we can tweak it, you know, a bit, but I don't think we have to go down 2 feet or 3 feet or anything like that. But there's just, again, we have to get comfortable with the sections to evaluate this, and that's where we are. So I think the comment would be provide additional information, reduce if we can, you know, and shifting it and moving the building and tweaking something might give you that opportunity to come down a foot somewhere. I don't know.
I have a question. Could we, as an effort to have, you know, these sections drawn and the heights shown more clearly, could we do that? And if we can find a way to lower the house here and there, you know, for more study, show that in a section and not have to redo all the elevations too? You know what I'm saying? Could we do that with a line on the elevation showing how much we've lowered it or what we've changed? Only because it's so much work to redo the entire project just to show it in elevation down, whatever it becomes.
I'd be comfortable.
You know what I'm saying?
That's fine with me.
I mean, I think there's ways of showing
I'm actually not comfortable with that because eventually you're going to have to put this in the computer and you're going to have to do working drawings and run with it. We have to take the assumption that this project's going to go to the city council. It's going to be appealed. We want to have a good, clean set of drawings so we know what we're looking at.
I'm sorry.
Well, and then we've had a couple other people who draw these drawings that there's little mistakes that happen, and then we bless it and we go, oh my gosh, how'd they get through? Because they pull out the old set of drawings and say, here it is. And you go, yeah, but you know, it was an illusion, or we got fooled a little bit. So to have more accurate drawings, there's nothing wrong with that for the size and scale of this project.
So one of the things that I would recommend, and I'm not a Photoshop guy, but I'm a CAD guy. I can draw it, but but with Photoshop, I know you can take this in and actually just lower it a foot without redrawing it. So there's ways of doing it. Yeah, but the accuracy of the sections are going to be really important. And I don't know if you're proposing just to hand draw them and have very schematic sections, or actually work out all of the detailing that reflects the overall height that's going to be there. But that's going to be important. So I think, you know, Paul's looking for more information, and that more information might give him more leverage to say you can lower it 2 feet. But based on what the majority of the board saw out there, there was some comfort there that this felt okay. I mean, we can tweak it, but we're still needing a little bit more information. We have information story poles, we have information drawing, but we don't have all of it kind of together yet. So clear direction again. That's the issue of the ridges, basically. Plate heights will be part of the section drawings. The secondary building, the same information for that needs to occur as the main. Paul made a comment. I agree with him that, you know, if that building can come down a foot or so, because it's a large plate height, it looks like from the plans, that would be appreciated. And Anybody jump in if I'm mentioning something you disagree with, but I'm trying to give the applicant clear direction. I'm sorry? I'm just trying to make...
Could I just get clarification on the portal, since that came up? This is kind of a reversal from clear direction we've had before. I understood reduce the depth of it. It's 10 foot wide, 12 foot deep, the passage through. Are we talking 10 feet, or... I mean, I don't know where you're going with that.
I'm not sure there's a magic number that we can pull out of our hat right now.
Study that. We can look at
Yeah,
it.
to reduce the mass of it. And I think we just...
Would you like to get rid of it? I mean, is that
No.
what... Oh, okay.
Okay.
Love it.
Okay.
Just
Okay, because-
so heavy, that's all. Just
All right.
lighten it up a
Sure,
little bit.
sure, sure. I just wanted to
Yeah.
clarify whether,
Yeah.
that they...
Good.
Do other board members concur that they're okay with the portal? It just needs to be lessened in its massiveness?
I am fine the way the house is now.
Okay.
To be honest with you, I would approve it the way it is now. So that's all I'm going to say.
And again, incorporation of the civil or the existing contours into the plan, into the sections, I think is something that needs to occur. Any additional requests for the applicant? Landscaping-wise, do we need to see additional comments?
I have a comment on that, just a comment, because you have to clear Ann Marks because you're in high fire. Yankee Point's not going to fly with her.
good,
You know,
yeah,
this-
okay.
She wants, you can do Centennial or you can do Hirschfiordum.
Okay.
How do you feel that if the applicant, I'm sorry, how do you feel if the applicant moves that building closer to those oak trees, how she'll respond to that?
That's not good.
It's not good either, right?
It's not good either.
So there's a balance always.
Yeah.
The rule is 15 feet
Yeah.
away from
Right.
it, so you can't go
We're
any
close
closer.
already, yeah.
Well,
So that kind
I-
of messes
I-
up
I-
going
Place,
east.
yeah. Rock and a hard place.
well, maybe I'm running out of room to...
Yeah. We're running out of wiggle room.
The guest house.
You can only do what you can do.
I'm sorry?
Okay.
The guest house is right at the canopy. I mean,
That's true, too.
Yeah. Our arborist did say that you could encroach into the
Yeah, the root study. Yeah.
Oh.
There's a report filed already?
There is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe they should run that by the fire department. The
Yes.
fire department reviewed the access, which is one thing. Now we're looking at Ann Marks, which is the wildlife. Wild card. I wouldn't say wildfire protection stuff. Just double check that the next time before you come.
Okay. So I don't know if we actually kept a bullet point of things.
For the record. Okay.
You're doing a
Who wants to do it?
Nobody's willing to make a motion.
Try.
Go ahead.
I stink at this. Okay. I'd like to make a motion for a continuance for 4 weeks. Is that right?
Can we decide?
Discuss that, maybe
Can we discuss that?
It's fine. I mean,
Okay.
it's
When we
indefinite
I think
continuance?
you get to go on vacation.
An indefinite continuance, we'll say.
Yeah, okay. That's good. And we can call you to make arrangements for that. We'll call the city and make arrangements. Okay.
Okay, with the following comments. To provide more information through the use of sections through the building, through the property, utilizing existing topography, so that we might get a better sense of the plate heights and, noting all plate heights and ridge heights. Does that cover?
Pitches, all kinds of
Yes.
sectional information.
That'd be number one. Number two, examine the thickness of the portal entry into the property, and see if there's any way to lighten that up a little bit. Its bulk. There's one more.
The secondary building.
The secondary building. That's what I'm looking for. I hate to say study. Study the height of the secondary building and reduce, if possible, the ridge height of that building.
Okay.
If possible, any leeway to bump the house to the east and perhaps to the north would be appreciated. Just to study that if possible to, right, without affecting the health of the existing oak trees. So if possible, this key word there.
Okay, that's a first. Is there a second to that motion?
So you're not actually asking for any reductions at this point in the heights? You're asking just to
Right, study.
just to show sections.
That's the motion
in
at this
relation-
point,
Okay,
yes.
sorry, I just want to make sure that it's clear.
Could I have one small thing? Do you mind if we take down the story poles rather than waiting the 2 days at this point? It's just up, it's in your purview to do it.
Is that in our purview?
It is.
To say it's okay to take them down?
It's
If you feel that there's sufficient photo documentation, which
It seems that the neighbors have plenty of photo documentation if we don't. So I would say, sure, take them there. So I'm thinking perhaps a little bit more language about the reduction of the height is in order.
Okay, so your motion's going to include reduction in
Study reduction.
Studies, it's a hard thing to phrase. Hard thing to phrase because...
Again, it's a motion.
Well,
We haven't voted
I rather liked the idea of Brian's idea of stepping, that if we do insist upon a reduction in height, which I would be very comfortable with, that they can step down onto that courtyard patio, and that's actually quite nice.
So your motion's going to include
Reducing the height of the building.
any number or any...
No.
Okay.
I can't put a specific number
To
on
look
it.
for opportunity to reduce.
Look for all opportunities
So I have a question here.
to reduce the height.
We're in a motion right now. We're trying to get through a motion here. Okay, so that's a first. Is there a second to that motion?
I want to add to the motion.
I'll second it.
I do.
Is you second?
Can I say one thing
Second.
before you finish the motion?
We're not done with the motion. I'll give you an opportunity before we close out on it. We have a second on that motion. Now, discussion about that motion. Anybody?
Can we make a straw vote who would approve the plans now?
You can do that if this motion doesn't carry,
Okay.
but
I'm
we haven't
a little-
voted on the motion
Okay, I
yet.
understand. I'm a little uncomfortable with the study of the sections because it's a little too open to more, and I'm thinking we should be a little more specific in terms of the reduction of the height.
Okay. Michelle, can I stop the motion and do a straw vote right now? Okay. So the straw vote would be who's in favor of approving the plans as we see them
Yeah.
for project design approval?
Who would vote for it now? I would vote for
It's close, but
So there's probably 3 people on
but
the
we have
board.
to be really
But now that we know that, we have to look at reducing the height of the building.
well. That's her motion.
Yes.
You seconded it.
And I second it.
Seconded it. Additional comments? Do you want to?
I don't think you need to redraw all the elevations. Let's go ahead. Why don't you scan it, and then if there's a couple of places you could drop it down a foot, why, go ahead
We
and do
could
that.
show that clearly without redoing every single drawing. on
I don't
the
think
entire
that's,
set.
yeah.
That was your comment?
Well, that's what I'd like to have you guys say as a motion, so we don't have to
What needs to
redo.
be clear in the drawing is what the actual height is. And so if we have a hand drawing that says it's going to be 17 feet to the top of this ridge, then when you're in construction drawings, it's not going to grow to 17.3.
If we do that, we might need a lot more vertical information on these drawings unless you have sections going through everything. So
That's easier. We could just do working drawing sections of the thing, actually. I mean, if you want us to do that.
I'm just saying on the elevations, you're going to need to dimension every bridge that's on there
That's okay.
of the proposed reduction or not.
I also ask the question if they understand kind of the comment and the motion about what to do with the secondary unit, about seeing if you can reduce the plate heights or the size and provide some overall heights. If you could put those elevations, there you go.
It's easy. It's
Okay.
easy. Yeah.
Okay. Additional comments regarding that motion?
Yeah, I mean, I always like to add that, we go through so much scrutiny as architects and, criticism it's always nice to add to these motions that you're generally happy with, you know what I mean? And so the portal issue doesn't come up again, and it just doesn't go on and on. I think that's important to remember moving forward.
Okay, so we can add to Denise's comment, if she's willing, that the portal design is appreciated, but just to study the lessening of the massive nature of it, or the mass of it.
Tolkien mass. But it is very much appreciated. It's a beautiful design feature.
Any other comments for the motion? We'll take a vote on the motion. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? So it's an indefinite continuance.
Thank you. Thank you.
So maybe we'll see you in 4 weeks.
Yeah, maybe. Well, for sure 4, maybe 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'd be nice.
Thank you for everybody coming.
Thank you, guys. I greatly appreciate it. Oh, no. But are we still on?
Your camera was dead.
You're going to take that problem.
Is that living room. You don't want the living room that 1 foot too low behind that ridge.
Yeah.
And if that's what drives everything else, and you don't want to set. You don't need condensed meat.
So we're gonna move to item number 3, 221 Oliver Road, and we've seen this project before. So we're gonna have some minutes from the prior meeting, and it'll just take a minute to get drawings and those comments in front of us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
We're good now.
Thanks very much.
Oh, wait, people are leaving their jobs.
Okay, so we have the minutes from the prior meeting, and Denise is going to read those
Here.
minutes. Well, we don't have staff yet, but we'll get them there.
So that was the last time we used in the 14th, February 14th.
No.
Yes, that's correct.
February?
That's correct.
February 14th.
Wow.
Seems like a long time ago.
It does, yeah.
Valentine's Day.
Okay. So the
We've
minutes,
only been once for this project.
the minutes from the prior meeting.
Okay, number 1, the board was not supportive of the design as proposed, as it is too imposing. Sorry, I'll start over. The minutes from the last meeting, the board was not supportive of the design as proposed, as it is too imposing of an addition at a non-conforming setback. Number 2, return with a second-story solution to the structure that attempts to observe most of the required setback. Number 3, the board found the 72-inch high plaster wall in the front yard setback in keeping with the existing architecture. However, the applicant is to return with additional documentation from the original permit.
Thank you very much. If you could introduce yourself.
Dan Weber, I'm the architect.
Patrick McDermott, owner.
Thank you. And what have you done since the last?
All right, we've done a lot. First of all, statistically, I'm not sure exactly, I think we're like 10 square feet smaller than the last time you saw the project. So we're still at about 83% of the maximum allowed FAR. So I'll just go through the set really quickly, because I don't think there's anyone here who hasn't seen the project before, is there?
Wouldn't think so.
Brian.
I've seen it.
You saw it?
Oh,
yeah. My memory's worse.
Okay, good. Just reorientation here, corner of Hudson and Oliver, just below Cliff Drive.
Oh, yeah.
So the last time you saw the project, we'd proposed a second-story addition over the corner of the building where the garage is, closest to Hudson, to try to stay away from our neighbors. The board, of course, wasn't supportive of that, so we've done a complete redesign of the proposed addition and brought it fully into compliance with the setbacks. So we aren't requesting any modifications other than for the existing as-built walls that the previous owner designed and built.
Okay, we did want to make sure that we were in context as we started looking at this redesign. So we went around the neighborhood, all within 2 blocks or 3 blocks. I think everything's less than 3 of the property, but this is just a few of the many 2-story houses I picked. I wanted to make sure that we were being contextual with the Spanish-style houses that are in the neighborhood. And there's some here that are really big. This one in particular, no one really likes this one in the neighborhood. So we want to do a lot better than this.
This one's here twice.
Oh, yeah, that's an error. But yeah, we think we're good. We think we're in context and better than a lot of the ones that we see in the neighborhood. The existing house, I won't waste any time with that, but I did want to show you. This is a permit set that the previous owner got permitted, and it does show that the existing walls were approved and permitted and actually built as designed at 72 inches high. And this is a record set that we pulled from the city's archives, so you guys should have this. All right, site plan. Again, you guys recall that we have double front yard setbacks. The existing house encroaches 10 feet for most of the length and 15 feet into the setback where the garage is. The red dash line indicates our previously requested second-story addition. And the blue hatched area indicates what we're proposing today, which is a new second-story addition that's in full compliance with the setbacks on the site. We had proposed a deck that's over the backyard, and we've reoriented, as the board suggested, the addition into this corner of the site. We think it was a great suggestion. It allows us to take advantage of the morning sunlight in the bedroom and move the house so that it doesn't look over anyone's backyard as the previous design did a little bit. So we are proposing a deck over the existing building. There's no new building footprint. We're all over the existing building. We have kept the edge of the deck 15 feet away from the property line. And for the most part, we've tried to step the house back away from the property line as much as we could. This, as I'll show you, is the bedroom space, and this is a circulation space. But we did want to have enough area to make the addition worthwhile and fulfill the programmatic needs of the owner. I won't waste any time on the existing floor plan unless anyone has any questions. Down on the first floor, everything that's white is existing, and there's no revisions proposed. We are proposing that we add a new covered entry under the existing covered porch. So this is just so that we have a proper entry foyer, a place to hang your coat and put your shoes when you come in the door. And in the existing living room, we're proposing a new stairway that goes up to the addition on the second floor. This is, I'll show you on the elevations, kind of a tower form that punctuates the building vertically and will allow a little bit of interaction between the ground floor and the first floor by being able to look down and yell down to somebody in the living room down there. So you come up to an office which opens into the new master bedroom, and the master bedroom then opens onto a narrow, I think this is 5'6" deep deck looking over Oliver Street. Bathroom and a modest sized closet. This is the planter which I mentioned. We're staying 15 feet away from the property line. Oh, I mentioned that the living space, we've tried to hold it back as far as we can from the setback. I think this is 3'6", so we're almost 10 feet away from the property line. And the circulation space does approach the setback. These existing elevations and the proposed elevations. Okay, so last time you guys saw the project, we'd proposed to reorient the entry onto Hudson. We've abandoned that idea since the board indicated they wouldn't be supportive of any modifications, and we essentially couldn't do anything to this facade, as it's all within the setback. So we focused our attention on the Oliver side, tried to make a proper entry sequence and enhance the entry sequence that's already there, which is actually really nice right now. So the front, this is the new covered area that will be that entry foyer inside. This is all the existing face of the existing building, which we're maintaining, and in fact stepping back the existing covered porch away from the street further than it is today. The narrow deck, which the master bedroom will open onto above. The existing ceiling is 8 feet inside, We've allowed for a foot of structure and then an 8-foot plate on the bedroom upstairs. On the side that faces Hudson, the side street, this is all the existing facade as it is. You see back and beyond the edge of the deck up above and the new second story. This is the vertical element, which I said adds a little bit of volume into the living room. On the south side, which faces the interior property line, you see the planter area, which with the deck stepped away from the property line, new second story. This is the element that contains the stairwell and the volume element. The west side, which faces the backyard, is essentially the same as it is today. We're not proposing any changes to the west side, with the exception of enhancing the doorways. Right now, this is kind of a short doorway. I think it's probably only 6'6" tall. So we're proposing to replace those doorways and let a little bit more natural light into the living room. And you see the proposed second story beyond. I think that's it. If you guys have any questions, Patrick, did you want to add anything?
I think you did a great job.
All right, thank you very much. I think that was a good presentation. At this point, I'll open up public comment. If there's any member of the public that would like to comment on the project, not seeing any slips, I'll close public comment and go to questions from the board. I have a question. This planter right here, how does that work? I mean, I don't see...
Oh, well, let me...
I see how maybe it could work here, but...
So we're proposing a deck, which of course will have a 42-inch high rail around it, and at a certain height above the deck, I'm not sure, maybe only 18 inches or 2 feet high, we'd have a divider wall and basically a filled-in planter area so that we can have a little garden and a little bit of privacy screening to hold the edge of the deck back away from the rail.
So this is a little parapet wall here that the planter will be in.
Right. The floor level, if I can just mark right on my drawing here, is actually down here. That's the finished floor height. Mm-hmm. So I'm proposing like a half rail there. Okay. And somewhere right in this area will be a divider wall, so this area would be a planter.
I understand. Okay. Additional questions? Jim?
Yeah. Any modifications that you're requesting?
None.
There's no requested or required modifications for the proposed addition.
Okay.
We are requesting a modification for the as-built site wall, which the previous owner designed and had approved, but the planning staff has indicated was actually approved in error. So now
we already gave positive comments last time regarding that. Additional questions?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Where you have these plants going on, are you feel confident that the waterproofing issues or whatever? Is it actually going to be dirt fill on top of a roof?
Yeah, it'll be designed as a built-in planter with probably a stainless steel lining and an internal drain, which will drain out probably through a scupper on the side of the building.
Okay, thank you.
Aaron?
Did you study adding any fenestration where these closets are, just for interest?
Can you point to probably right there?
Well, I guess you'd be below that planter we were just talking about.
Oh, where I've got the vines growing up the side of the face. Well, that's, like you said, is closet space on the existing wall, where right now, today, there's no windows, there's no fenestration, there's no real need for windows. And
it's like a bird of paradise right there.
Yeah, there actually, if you look on the site plan, you can see right here is a significant sized tree that's planted in the interior yard between the two properties. I didn't want to show that because it would hide half the building there. But no, I think we're going to propose a vine to cover the wall to make sure that it masks the mass. But I don't think there's a real need or use for fenestration on the wall. I also I was playing with the idea of a wainscot there to help reduce that mass vertically.
Additional questions? If not, comments? Paul?
Well, two comments. I think the project is perfect. It's ready to move on to all your necessary steps. It's great. The only thing is I question the expense and the complexity of having to do your waterproofed planter over the bedroom below, and that it would be fine if that tile roof went up and then it became an asymmetrical roof pitch on the front view. I don't see it as being a hinder in the project. Because you were trying to make yourself have this certain design look, which works, but now you've just added all this extra liability as well as complexity in the building when it's not necessary, and it can be a lot cleaner. And I don't think it's going to ruin the architecture on that elevation.
I'll kind of jump on to Paul. That my eye went right there. That's why I asked the question. If that roof came through, wrapped around, whatever, but also if this deck actually visually reduced on the front, I think it would be more handsome. That's all I would say. But it's not a make or break deal. It's not a make or break deal for us.
What we are trying to.
We are in comments.
Would I be able to respond to that briefly? We are trying to be as economical as possible, and this corner, this facade is existing, and we're proposing to build right on top of it. So I actually would have liked to break the plane and actually step that back and forward there on the corner. I agree with you, but this was really driven by the desire to build over the existing and try to do as few of new footings as possible.
Changes. I think the mass Balkan scale is just right there. I like changing the entrance to Oliver. It seemed that you had it on the side before, didn't you? Mm-hmm. It seemed kind of forced there.
Yeah. Today, the existing house, the entrance is here. We're just we had proposed to change it to Hudson, and now we're just going back to keeping
so that pretty much makes the other side secondary. I mean, you have two front yards, and that's a true secondary front yard. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Sorry, Jim. Additional comments?
I have to. The city requires that I say that. that I learn how to turn on my microphone. That I was not here for the last review, but I've quickly reviewed them and read the minutes, so I am now up to snuff regarding your plans, and that's all I have to say.
Okay.
I think this is great. I think it's really a wonderful leap from where you were before, and I really do appreciate it. It's a good-looking house, and I don't mind the planter myself. I mean, I understand the fear, the leak fear, and all that, but I'm sure you know what to do. And I, being a landscaper, I enjoy having the idea of some green there. But really, really nice project.
Are you willing to wrap that into a motion?
Yeah, I would like to give this.
It would not be for preliminary. It would be moving it on to the staff hearing officer, and then if it's okay with the board, it probably can go to consent for preliminary and final all in one fell swoop.
And the only reason is because of that wall.
And it's because of the wall.
Right. Well, that sounds like a motion to me.
I'll make that motion. Okay, and I'm going to...
Okay. Let's clear that motion again.
To clarify, I'll make a motion with positive comments about the design, very well executed. Positive comments about the existing wall that didn't have the proper documentation, onwards to the staff hearing officer. The project can return back to consent for project design review approval, and that if the architect decides to alter the second story patio planter area, that be brought to the attention to the consent reviewer. But the board would be supportive of changes of that.
Is there a second yet?
I second it.
Second?
Under discussion, would we also need to see like light fixtures and
That would be what would be required before final.
Yeah.
If he would provide that at the consent level at one time, he might get both.
Yeah. So we would be able to request preliminary and final on it.
It's project design now, not preliminary, but yes, absolutely. If you have enough documentation for final,
Great. Board is your exterior light fixtures, and then that information also has
door window details, roof details, railing detail. What you would need to build that. Gotcha. I think you're well on your way, and I know you know how to do all that stuff. So
okay.
Beautiful drawings.
Thank you very much.
So we have a second. Any additional comments? Jim seconded. And let's take a vote on the motion. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And abstained? None. Motion carries unanimously. And like Jim has to, No, we didn't do NPO because that'll happen at consent, and we don't have to mention appeals because that'll happen as well. So, seeing no other
Thank you.
other items on the agenda, we'll stand adjourned.
We're in the toughest situation right now.